Morning. Thank you very much, Amanda, for the talk earlier. We always overestimate the change that's going to happen in the next 2 years, and we underestimate what's going to happen in the next 10. This is a quote from Bill Gates. It talks about transformation in general and how technology is used, but I think it's really applicable to where we are with AI right now. I kind of liken where we are with AI to being a bit like when we got an iPhone in 2007, 2008. It was a pretty dumb device. It replaced the Nokia thing that you had in your pocket. How many people here today could live without their iPhone right now or without their smartphone? I don't think anyone could. So my name is Fintan. I'm Director for Market Insights at GitHub. My role in GitHub is to bring the outside world into GitHub in some form of unbiased manner to help inform our overall strategy. Prior to working at GitHub, I actually used to be an analyst at Gartner, and I used to work at another firm called RedMonk. And at Gartner, I actually used to cover the API management space. So I think the WSO2 folks are much happier having me here on stage talking about stuff rather than writing magic quadrants. I know I'm much happier not writing magic quadrants. So I want to talk about 3 different things today and kind of walk through. So I want to talk about the journey that we've been on so far and how we've got to this point. I want to talk a little bit about the road ahead and what's happening in terms of AI and code and things that are going to be very impactful for you over the next couple of years. I'll point back to that 2 years versus 10. If I could predict 10 years out, I'd be working in a hedge fund. 2 years out, I'm working for a division of Microsoft. And finally, I want to talk about a thing which is essentially the elephant in the room, which is the AI value question. How do you show ROI from these tools? This is a question that we get all the time. But to do that, I need to go all the way back to 2008. That's when DevOps first emerged. And the reason I'm putting this up, these are the metrics from the DORA framework that people may be familiar with. The reason I'm putting this up is if you want to get the biggest bang for buck out of AI over here, you need all this DevOps stuff over here actually to be working. And in most organizations, it really isn't. But the upside is the AI part here can actually accelerate that. Now you get this nice virtuous cycle in terms of how it's actually going to happen. But there's reasons for this, and the reasons are quite important. This is data from the 2024 DORA DevOps report. It's a report that's sponsored by multiple companies, but basically ran out of Google. They just released a 2025 report last week, which is also a very good read. But they talk about elite performers in DevOps. And essentially, 20% of people fit into this kind of overall elite world. Everyone else fits into this wider band. Most of us sitting here, if we're honest, are sitting inside in this red box. We're not sitting in that elite performance. But this is really important. Again, I'm not going to go through the numbers here, but the underlying premise is if you are one of the elite performers, you are exponentially faster at delivering software at the moment, and that's only going to accelerate with AI. More importantly, you're able to deal with failures, which you're also going to get with AI, and you're able to deal with those much, much quicker. So that's the DevOps part. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of this talk. So paving the road to AI. So Amanda laid out some of the kind of dates and stuff that we've seen. In my world, GitHub Copilot arrived in June 2021. Okay, that's 4 years and 3 months ago. This is a date a little bit more for the connoisseurs. It was my job to be aware of these tools arriving. I think for most people, this just passed them straight by when that first kind of public preview came. But then we hit November 2022, and that's when ChatGPT enters the world. And for most people, ChatGPT really only entered their consciousness in early to mid 2023, so kind of February, March 2023. That's 2.5 years ago. That's a tiny period of time when we really think about it. And underlying all of this, what kind of is the fundamental base of all of this is this emergence of all the different models. Now, Amanda referenced the Meta Llama models, which I was actually going to make the same comment about the fact it's not open source, despite it being called open source. But we've had this emergence in terms of when ChatGPT 4 arrived, which was at the time an absolutely mind-blowing model. And if you ask people about it now, they're like, it's a bit old hat. We've gone from this world of these models that were pretty smart, able to do some interesting things, could suddenly start taking multimodal input like images and sound, et cetera, and start doing things with them, to this world of reasoning models, which is where we are now. Like Anthropic just released Claude 4.5 this week. And these reasoning models are really quite something in terms of how they work. Like they're able to think, they're able to actually go off and figure out the context they need to pull in, et cetera. And that opens up a whole world of possibilities. That leads me into my world, where I spend most of my time is around AI coding assistants, this market that exists here. And we fundamentally established the market within GitHub. There were a couple of smaller players with a couple of tools out there, but a bit like I was saying that the date was a date for the connoisseur, most people weren't aware of what those tools were. But the real moment when all of this kicked off was in 2023, when we opened up GitHub Copilot for Business and GitHub Copilot for Enterprise. That's when we brought in a whole set of enterprise governance features, IP indemnity, all sorts of different areas like that into the tooling. At the same time, we see a bunch of competitors starting to emerge. We see Cursor starting to emerge and Windsurf starting to emerge. We're quite flattered with the fact that they've actually taken an open source project from Microsoft in terms of VS Code and used that as the basis of what they're doing. I think that's good overall for the community. And the other part that's really good about this, and I would love if all of you were GitHub Copilot users. I'm under no illusions that everyone here is. But what we're seeing and what we're enjoying out of all of this is this has put a huge amount of pressure on us to innovate, which puts pressure on Cursor to innovate, which puts pressure on Windsurf to innovate. And all of that pressure is something that you all benefit from. We don't have to wait and kind of push vendors to do stuff. They're doing stuff at a rate that's really quite phenomenal. The other notable one that I have up here is when we released GitHub Copilot free. So it was a moment when anyone could start using Copilot, and we saw a big spike in overall usage at that point. But we've over 20 million users of Copilot at this point. And if we look at all of our competitors combined, we're essentially a multiple of that. Now, couldn't be an ex-Gartner analyst without having a hype cycle. So I want to talk a little bit about the pressures that are on all technologists in terms of understanding stuff with code. And I couldn't open my email in 2023 without someone telling me that I needed fine-tuning. Anyone here know what fine-tuning is before I start going into it? It's a couple of folks. So fine-tuning is essentially a mechanism where you can take a specific piece of data and train your model to work specifically on your type of problems. Right? When it comes to code, this turns out to be hard and computationally expensive. You need a big code base, you need a lot of GPUs, and you need a lot of time to be able to do it. But fine-tuning was a thing that everyone was supposed to have for every enterprise, and every technologist was supposed to know about it. And then we move on, and then we get RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, RAG is an amazing technology. You are all using RAG. If you're using any of these coding tools from any vendor, we're all using RAG under the hood. But when it first came out, we're all supposed to understand RAG. We're all supposed to figure out how to create vector databases, embed the data, send it over to the LLM, do all of these kind of things. And that was the kind of hype that we hit in late 2023. And then we hit MCP, and I'm assuming everyone here probably knows MCP. But Model Context Protocol came out from Anthropic in late 2023, and it's had a spike that was just astronomical. It just kind of went straight up. But then people started looking at it a bit closer and suddenly went, oh, hold on, there's the who, what, where, when, why questions that we all actually have when we're running these things in enterprises, and went, oh, hold on. We need to maybe take a little bit of a step back on this. And this is kind of a classic integration pattern. Like these problems are no different to problems that are being solved by vendors like WSO2 for quite a long time. And the underlying patterns are all the same. And then we have agentic. And I'm sorry to say this agentic curve is just going to keep going up. You are not going to hear the end of agentic for the next year. That brings us to the road ahead then. What's coming? And one of the things that's been really interesting from my world to look at is this emergence of the CLIs for AI coding assistants. And this started in early 2023, so this is only 8 months ago. This started with Claude Code, and Claude Code burst onto the scene. Now, I'm an old school Unix guy. I've got the gray in my beard, if not the hair that would have gone with it, because I'm somewhat follically challenged. I used to work at Sun Microsystems, so a CLI is not something that scares me. I'm very glad to see them coming back around. But there's a reason why people went down this route, is this enables a different type of automation which didn't exist before. And the market has changed and has evolved very rapidly here. OpenAI released the first versions of their codex. We've released our CLI in the last couple of weeks. If you want to play around with one of these for free, the Google CLI is available that you can just play around with. The limitation of that is that you're tied to just a Gemini model. So if you're doing a Flutter app or something, that's great, but it may not be the best thing in the world if you've got an old COBOL base that you're taking a look at. But all of these enable agentic AI. And you're going to hear agentic a lot. And I think it's worth having a definition of what agentic is. So if we think about it in terms of what they're doing, essentially agentic AI agents are autonomous or semi-autonomous as pieces of software. So by autonomous, that's something I can delegate a task to and it will go off and do it. So within the GitHub interface, you can go and click on an issue, you can click delegate to Copilot and it'll go off and it'll start working on the issue and it'll start pulling things through and trying to create an environment for you. And you can do this with some of the other tools as well. We have this idea of delegating something to an agent. The semi-autonomous is where I'm interacting with it. I'm doing something with it, but it's going off and making decisions, it's trying to work through things, and it's working towards a goal. You've told it to do something, and it has agency to go off and figure out what it's actually trying to do. But the problem with agentic AI, and the problem with all things LLMs, is that you need to tell it what to do in a lot of detail and do it properly, and people struggle with that. So the big trend that you're all going to see, unfortunately, the definition here hasn't come up. I have a link at the end of this to a blog post where I'll add the definition of spec-driven development in. But essentially, spec-driven development is this newly emerging paradigm where you essentially set a contract for what you want your code and your LLM to do, and it works. It provides you a framework where you can kind of work through setting up all of the environment, et cetera, and what you're doing. So within Microsoft, we recently open sourced a toolkit called SpecKit. And SpecKit works with GitHub Copilot, as expected, also works with Google Gemini and with Claude Code and all of the other kind of CLI tools. But it allows you to go off and kind of put in a very basic prompt and then start working through a set of steps to define how you're going to build something. What's the architecture? What's the tasks? What exactly has to be done? And it uses a test-driven development approach to power all of this. It's really, really powerful. It is something that is going to be part of your working lives very, very soon. I guarantee you this. The other part that's interesting with what's happening with spec-driven development is the new innovations that are coming out around it. So there's an interesting firm that's based here in London called Tessel, who've just released their products in the last couple of weeks. And they released a thing called the Tessel Framework, which you need a license for, but they also released a thing called the Tessel Registry, which actually provides guardrails for about 10,000 open source components in terms of how you want your LLMs to use it. So I'm building a Spring Boot application, but I want it to behave in a certain way, pull in the stuff from the registry, use that as part of your spec-driven development approach. But all of these ultimately map to a spectrum of approaches. Now, I'm going to caveat this slide with two things. So first off, I am not a graphic designer, and I couldn't get to our graphic designers to help me with this one in time. Secondly, I want to give credit for this slide. So this is derived from some work by a guy called Richard Swarter, who's the chief evangelist at Google Cloud. And he has this definition where he talks about kind of three layers or three interactions that we have with LLMs and how we work through it. And we delegate things, we supervise things, and we collaborate with these tools. Okay? And this is quite a powerful kind of approach in terms of how we're doing things. But overlaid on that, we have our different modes. We have interactivity, we have our actual user-written code, and then we have instructions that we're giving. Now, if you think about the various modes of developing code that I've talked about here, you can overlay all of these on top of it. So you got agentic, will span absolutely everything. I'm doing my hands-on keyboard work, that's going to be very much along my supervise and collaborate type things. And then there's vibe coding. Now, those of you that have been listening closely will notice I haven't mentioned vibe coding up to now. There's a lot of reasons for this. The two big ones that I'll give you is, first off, you're all enterprise technologists, so you have seen this pattern before of some tool that's going to replace everyone that doesn't replace everyone. And the second one is a phrase I use quite a lot, which is, if you like vibe coding, you're going to absolutely love vibe security. So with that, I want to move on to the value question and kind of the big elephant in the room. And I kind of liken this to a tale of two AI cities. Okay, so we've got this cyberistic futurescape that's a bit like out of a William Gibson novel where you're looking on X or you're looking on LinkedIn and everyone's doing all of these amazing things all the time with all of the AI tools and they're rushing off ahead. It's all influencers, just to be really clear, it's all influencers. The amount of people that are using this at massive scale inside their organizations is really still quite low. It's a bit more like this. It's like we've got this big architectural edifice that's in front of us that we have to deal with. Some of it's beautiful. There's some really rusty, horrible things in behind it. We know that we have to deal with all of that. But there is a new dawn. There is a lot of people looking at it kind of going, okay, I know I can use this. I know this is going to fit inside of my organization and I can make use of these tools. I talked a lot about DevOps earlier. I'm going to highlight 3 kind of frameworks here to kind of bring it back around. There's a framework called DORA, which I've mentioned. There's Space, and there's DevX. There's a whole bunch of other frameworks as well. I'm not going to give a DevOps talk, but take a look at the frameworks, try to figure out something that you can use to measure. Okay, the measurements are really, really important. My former colleagues at Gartner have put up a nice Harvey Bowl summary of all of these things. I know what creating these diagrams is like. It's not much fun when you're doing them at the time, but it's a useful summary of what all of these frameworks actually are. And the second one that comes up is AI adoption trends and kind of thinking about what's happening elsewhere in the industry. So I talked quite a lot about putting this in. This is a set of data that came out from a company called DX about 2 weeks ago. DX are a software engineering intelligence vendor, so essentially they look at all the metrics, try to pull all the data together for you and other such things. By virtue of the company that they are, DX's own customer base is going to be quite forward-leaning, so that's going to skew the results. The second reason I talk quite hard about it, because I've pulled out the 2 data points, which I'll talk to, is the Twitter account, Crimes Against Charts. This will appear in Crimes Against Charts at some stage, because it's impossible to read as a chart by itself. But they highlighted 2 really interesting things. The daily or weekly usage of AI in most technology organizations right now is running somewhere around 40%. That's in places like where I work. I know it's running higher where I work across our engineering org, but across other areas and other functions, it's not quite as high. But what they saw in their customer base versus 18 months ago when it was about 20% is that over 50% of their customer base are actively using AI tools all the time. So it is being used, again, with that caveat of this is the forward-leaning types of organizations. So I want to wrap up with how do I show value from these tools, okay? And first off, I want to highlight something that's going on right now, what we're seeing in this coding space, which is around vanity metrics. So lines of code has, for some bizarre reason, become a metric that everyone's requesting, and all of us as vendors are providing in our tools. Now, lines of code to me is a bit like a McKinsey intern went off and read The Mythical Man Month and then went to a vendor and went, here's a metric that you can use and you should tell everyone to use this. If your management chain is telling you to use lines of code right now, just type be more verbose at the end of every prompt and your lines of code problem is solved and you'll get a whole top performance rating. But the underlying reason for kind of highlighting this is that these vanity metrics are damaging to you. So secondly, understand your baseline. I won't go back into the DORA stuff, but basically understand that you have to set a baseline. The most common problem that we encounter is that people haven't actually set a baseline, and they go, what's the ROI? And I say, well, how are you measuring the ROI of any other tool right now? I say, well, we don't actually know. So set a baseline, understand what that is, and then iterate and refine on those metrics. Understand how you're going to use them and how you're going to evaluate them. So with that, I will say thank you. As said, my name's Fintan Ryan. Contact details are there. I'll be hanging around for a good chunk of the morning. And there is a blog post at the bottom there which has links to all of the various tools and resources that I mentioned today. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks, Fintan. Thank you.